What's going on today, guys? Today we're going to be installing a clutch kit in the ZF6 truck right back here. I have the clutch kit right over here. It's an LUK clutch kit. Pretty much just going to be pulling the truck into the shop here and putting it up on some stands because I can't stand crawling out from underneath the truck that's super low. So let's go ahead and get this thing in. I'm just going to kind of do a rundown on the clutch kit, and then this is going to be kind of like a install video, how to swap a clutch, how to do it. So I hope you guys enjoy the video and stay tuned. So, like I mentioned, the LUK clutch kit is going to be the clutch kit that I'm going to be using. It is a little bit better than the Ford kit. I want to say it's rated for around 300 horsepower, where the factory clutch is only rated for 280. So it's got a little bit bump in the horsepower, but also the big difference here is that it comes with a solid mass flywheel versus the factory Ford dual mass flywheel. The difference between that is with a dual mass flywheel, there's actually springs inside of the flywheel, and that's what creates the pressure on the pedal. With a single mass flywheel, there is no springs, it's solid, and then the spring tension actually comes from the pressure plate. So this kit is complete. Like I said, comes with a flywheel, your flywheel bolts, pressure plate, and then the disc is actually underneath that. And then it comes with your new throwout bearing, new input bearing there, and then actually the clutch alignment tool, which is necessary for installing this. So we have the front of the truck up on some jacks, and then basically before I put the rear of the truck up in the air, I'm going to pull the rear drive shaft out, and then we can get the rear axle up in the air and start working on the trans. So
are you listening? Damn.
with the rear drive shaft off, which they are a 12.12 mil, now you're going to want to take off at least the back part of the front drive shaft. In order to do that, you got to be able to keep it from spinning. So all you got to do is just lock the truck into 4x4 and then lock your hubs, make sure the hubs are locked, and then you can do the same thing on these. Like I said, 12 mil 12 point, pop those loose, and then just take the front of this and just kind of bungee it to the frame to keep it out of the way. So sometimes with these, you do have to heat up the bolt. Well, actually not the bolt, but the flange that the bolt threads into in order to get these out. Sometimes it can be kind of rough. And then you'll notice that once you pull all four of the bolts out, that the two flanges will actually still be stuck together. So then you just get a hammer, hit it, and it'll break it. So now with both of the drive shafts undone, we can start moving towards the front here and start unhooking some other stuff. Okay, I'm on the driver's side here, and one of the easier things to undo is going to be your clutch actuator right here. This is what disengages the clutch forks inside of here. So basically all you got to do is you got to push in, twist about 90 degrees, actually about 45 degrees, and then pull straight out, and the whole piece will come out just like that. Now with this out, you're definitely not going to want to push the clutch, because this is where your fluid comes down and then pushes on that. So definitely with this out, do not push the clutch in. So just kind of, like I said, bungee it out of the way, and then it'll be good. Okay, so now that we have both drive shafts unhooked and we have some of the smaller things undone underneath there, I'm gonna go ahead and jack up the rear end of the truck and get that on some jack stands. That's way it's a lot easier to get out from underneath the truck and
trans jack underneath there and having the trans come down and everything. It's just gonna be a lot easier to have the truck higher up off the ground. So let's get the rear end of the truck up, and then we'll go from there. Now, before we get too carried away underneath the truck, we do have to focus a little bit on the inside of the truck here for the shift lever. Basically, all it is.
So basically, the only thing you have to do inside of the cab here is there's 4 screws on the corners here of this plastic piece. Once you remove that, you can pull this rubber boot up high enough, and you'll get the 2 bolts that hold the top part of the stick shift on. Pull those out, and then on the top of the trans there are 4 Allen heads. You remove those, and the top part of the stick will actually pull out, and that way you have enough room to move the trans back and then down for the input shaft coming out of the clutch assembly. So that's pretty much it. I'll record it, and you know, I'll show you guys stuff as we go. So this is what it'll look like when you pull the top of the assembly off. And basically all it is, like I said, this is the top part of the shaft, and that bolts to the top part of this right here, and then that ball goes down and sits into that hole, and that's where you get all your leverage to be able to shift. So like I said, it's just 4 Allen head bolts to pull that top piece off, and then that is pretty much it for the interior of the truck. And so we're gonna go back underneath and start unhooking more stuff. Okay, I'm on the driver's side of the transmission, and the next thing you are going to want to unhook is going to be, if you have electronic 4x4, all you have to do is unhook connectors. But if you have manual 4x4 like I do, you actually have to get this part out of here. So you have to undo that bolt right there, that big one, and then you have to unhook it from the tab right there. So that'll be the next thing. And then once you accomplish that, then you can unplug all the other harnesses. Like you got a couple of connectors on this side and on this side. Undo those, get the wiring harness out of the way, and then we can start moving to the bell housing bolts.
Alright, so the next step is actually pretty important here. We're actually going to unhook the starter and remove the starter. You have to do that in order to pull the transmission. But the first thing you're going to want to do is get an 8mm, go over to each ground side of your batteries and unhook the batteries. We don't need anything crazy happening while we're messing with the starter, so make sure you unhook both negative sides of the battery and then go ahead and pull the starter.
Okay, so with the starter out of the way now, I like to move on to the bell housing bolts. I know we still have to unhook the transmission lines, and obviously we have to get this cross member out of the way, but those are like the last 2 things that I always like to do. So I like to take out all of the bell housing bolts except for 2. So I'll leave that one in, and then I'll leave one on this side in, probably just the one just above the starter point here. So I'll leave those 2 in, I'll pull all the other ones, so that way when I have the trans jack up here, I'm not trying to work around it to get all of them out. I only have to get the 2 out. So that's what I'm gonna do next. And then we'll get the trans jack underneath here and start pulling some other stuff. Alright, so the transmission is out of the way. You will notice that it is easiest to pull transmission straight back when everything is perfectly aligned. When that input shaft is perfectly aligned, you're going to have no friction on the shaft, keeping it from being able to pull out of the pressure plate up here. So
With that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and pull the pressure plate off. It's just a couple of bolts all the way around. Pull that off, and then you'll have bolts in the center for the flywheel. You can pull that off next. And then the other thing, we have a new throwout bearing, so we will pull that off there. That's just tabbed on there. And then we have a new input bearing, which is actually on the flywheel. So yeah, this should go pretty simple here, and we'll get this stuff out of the way.
Okay, so with the old clutch assembly out of the way, we can go ahead and start assembling this. I actually already put the input bearing, the new input bearing in. I found a socket that worked best to go around that piece, which is shallow, and go on to the main part down there. And then just use the hammer, even, and then just went straight down on top of it. So with that on, next we will go underneath there with the new flywheel bolts. We're going to torque those. There's actually a torque sequence for these. So we're going to go ahead and torque those, and then we can assemble the pressure plate to go back in. Now, when installing your new flywheel, it does have a dowel, the dowel coming off of the crank, so that you can align the flywheel onto the crank. And then once you get it up there, you pretty much just get a few in, and then you can just thread the rest of them in. And then the torque spec on these is crisscross pattern, star pattern, okay? And basically the first torque sequence is 44, and then the second torque sequence is 69 foot-pounds. So you'll probably have to have somebody hold the front side of the crank while you torque these, but that is the correct way to do it. So we're going to go ahead and get all of these bolts in, and then we will do the torque sequence. All right, now that we have our flywheel torqued, we're going to assemble our pressure plate here in our disc. You will notice on the disc, you have to be sure to, let's see where it's at here, right here in really small lettering, that says flywheel side. So this side will face the flywheel, which means this pressure plate, the disc here, will sit just like this on the pressure plate, with this side facing the flywheel, just like it says. And then we will use our alignment tool. When we're putting this up there, we will use our alignment tool. This will go into there, and then this piece here, this end, will go into the input bearing, just like that. And then we can put this on there and then thread our bolts in, and this helps us keep everything aligned and straight when we put our pressure plate assembly on. So let's go ahead and start doing that. So there it is, guys. The pressure plate is installed. As far as using the alignment tool goes, it's pretty simple. What you're going to want to do is the flywheel is torqued down, and then you take your clutch disc and you put the clutch disc on with the correct side facing the flywheel, the side that says flywheel side, and then you put your alignment tool in to hold the clutch disc in place, and then you take your pressure plate and you go over top of it and then get a couple of bolts started. And then with this too, same thing, a crisscross pattern, and these are only torqued to 20 foot-pounds. The first two that you do, there's alignment dowels, one there and then one on the opposite side. Torque those two first before you torque the rest, 20 foot-pounds. And now with this aligned and good to go, this is pretty much just a reversal of procedure. One more quick note, guys. The clutch assembly the clutch kit comes with assembly lube to use. One of the best places to use that, they say to put it on the splines of the input shaft. I'm not really a big fan of that, just because if you do get it on the clutch material, your clutch will slip and you'll have all sorts of issues and you'll end up having to tear it apart again. But for sure, definitely put the lube on the input shaft on the very end of it where it goes into the input bearing, and then I also like to put a little bit where the throwout bearing slides and rides on. So I'll do that.
But as far as putting it on the splines, I don't usually put it on the splines, but definitely on the end of the input shaft there and where the throttle bearing rides. All right, so if you've made it this far in the video, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a teaser of the race truck build. I know it's been a few videos since the last time I posted about the race truck build. That's because I've been trying to kind of fighting a few things here and there, but we are making progress on it. I'm putting together a video about the next kind of little thing that I'm doing to it. So I'm gonna, at the end of this video, I'm gonna throw a quick little picture teaser for you guys, just so you guys can see that I am still working on it. It is still coming along. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, hit the like button before you go. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys on the next episode.